There we go. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Happy Friday.
It's Janet and Marie, and thank you for joining us with our Friday Talk About It. So, what have you been reading this week, Marie?
So I've been looking at and doing some research with Laura Beth Neilson's book, License to Harass.
Right. Isn't
And
that good? Yeah,
it's very good. It's very good. And we have used some of that in our next blog
that's right.
to express a lot of ideas in that blog.
So,
I think it's going to be a good one.
I think it is too. It looks good so far, and we're calling it stalking or free speech. What's the threat? So, we have tackled a big subject because free speech is a big subject right now in the news around a lot of things. And so we decided to tackle this subject. We have, I think, taken on this subject from a standpoint of, see, how do I want to say this? Talking about what's important to know about the difference between free speech and stalking.
And,
Because
and really educating ourselves.
exactly. And I was surprised to learn how straightforward the law is. Oh, and I read this article in the Houston Chronicle about this fellow who got a young high school girl to start communicating with him via text. And he got involved with her and started asking her progressively more enticing questions like, can you send me a naked picture? And things like that. And that seems to happen. It happened to this girl, and it became what he called a dominant submissive relationship, which apparently turned him on, but it also scared her. And when he called her a butterfly in a cage, she turned
Yeah.
in, talked about it with her father. So they prosecuted this guy, and he was found guilty of stalking. And the law is in our blog. It's very interesting. Well, he appealed and said that the stalking statute is too broad, and this relationship was consensual. And he used that in his appeal, and the judge came back and said, sorry, bud, you're going to jail. And what was interesting was that he thought what he was doing was free speech, and what he was actually doing was stalking. And the judge put him in jail, and that was in Houston, Texas. So it was kind of interesting. Yeah, and
It
then
is interesting because my understanding initially was that stalking only rises to the level of being illegal when a threat is imminent, when there's bodily harm has been threatened. And actually, by putting it on an electronic device, you also get into that area where it becomes illegal.
exactly. And in the blog, I talk about how I had a terrible, terrible boss. One of those desperate jobs you take when you've got to put food on the table or buy shoes for the kids,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of time. And I got this job, and my boss was an evil, evil, evil man. And the women in the office had to be quote unquote punished in the back if they made a mistake, right? Which must, have sex with him. I mean, that's insane.
That
So
sounds so crazy
so
now.
I turned him in. I turned him into the California Labor Board because he wasn't paying any employment tax on us. He paid us in cash. So I thought, well, that's the way I can get to. I quit, of course. I walked out and said, not enough for me, and went home. And in those days, we had those answering machines where there was a recording. And apparently, the labor board went after him and shut down his business. And he called my home one night, and to make it really dramatic and juicy, I was making dinner for the kids, and they were watching the Brady Bunch on TV. And as I was making dinner, and I played my answering machine, and on it he said he had people who he knew who he could have kill me, and that he was out to kill me. And I was shocking, and I won't go into the drama of it, but I saved it, and I called the police in Newport Beach, California, and reported him. And I had the recording and I played it for the cops. And you know what their response was, Marie?
Yeah.
Huh, sweetheart. If I were
Go
you,
with it.
I'd go with the flow. What?
Yeah.
Well, that was 1982. Nowadays, I could put the guy in jail. Oh, I wish I could. I still remember that.
Well, and you know what? That brings me to another book that I'd like to mention called
Ooh,
Believing, Our 30-Year Journey to End Gender Violence, which was written by Anita Hill.
oh yeah.
And if you think about it, the law has changed since those days
Yeah,
and
it
for the
has.
better. We have made progress. And I really enjoyed the talk that she gave because she held out a beacon of hope that yes, the law is still somewhat imperfect in some ways, and as you said, Janet, there are wrinkles in it,
Yeah,
and the way it's carried out is sometimes very complicated.
yeah.
There is progress being made. Yeah.
I think so too. I enjoy the conversation that, uh, what's her name again? Nielsen.
Laura Beth
Laura
Neilson.
Beth Neilson. How Laura Beth talks about it in, I think there was a blog that was written about what she wrote about. But her whole idea is, look, those cat calls in the street, you know, when you walk around New York City, you know better than anyone. You lived in New York. So
Are you
there's all
talking to
this,
me?
like this good-natured guys will be guys, right? But it can get really upsetting if it happens. It's happened to me when I went to New York on business. Um, it's just unsettling. And her question was, can that be called illegal? And
Yeah,
not yet. Not yet. It's free speech. But if
it's free
someone
speech.
picked up a wrench and threw it at you, that is illegal. So I
Even
think,
if they miss, I'm kidding.
yeah,
Um,
I know. And they hit your
Even if
girlfriend
they
you're walking
miss,
with.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's terrible in New York sometimes. My gosh.
Well, it's not just New York. It's any construction. It used to be any construction site where the guys would be hanging out and appreciating the women as they walked by. You know, it can happen in any city.
Yeah, it can happen in any city. It can get pretty raunchy, I think. So, hey, what have you been writing lately? What have you been working on?
Well, I'm writing a collection right now about that deals with the epidemic that is taking place right now, which is I call it the contagion of uh, of self-destruction. And when I say self-destruction, I'm talking about people who have depression
Yeah.
and self-medicate and get addicted to drugs. And addiction is something that doesn't take down just the addict, it takes down the whole family, all the loved ones. It affects everyone around them. So I'm focusing my writing on that right now, and I think it's an important issue.
I think it is too. I I don't know. I don't know how that will ever be solved. I don't know if it ever can be solved.
There
I,
is no cure. There is no cure.
there's no cure.
There,
And what about for the families, though? I mean, is there? I don't even know how we could possibly deal with that. I mean, we meaning humans, right? Not just our company.
it's it's not something that has a nice, tidy ending. It's not like a Lifetime movie. And
It's
you know,
not.
but
Or
then
yeah.
yeah, and then families that deal with like somebody who's bipolar or somebody, and it's affecting more and more younger people now. And to think of a 20-year-old who has a life ahead of them being sort of excuse me, blocked by something like that, like a
But you know,
diagnosis of
yeah,
uh,
because it's not just an opioid epidemic. It's not just that people go to the doctor and get a pain pill and whoops, all of a sudden they get hooked, right?
right.
But they are more addictive and there are more substances that are lethal in them, right?
Well, think about our entire culture is is encouraged to take a tablet, take a NyQuil and go to work, take a DayQuil and go to work, continue on, take this
Yes,
tablet for that, take a
yes,
Tylenol, take a this, take a that, and keep powering through through it. And these are things that mask symptoms, but don't change the root of what's going on with you. If you take Tylenol for a headache, there's a reason why you have that headache. And
Right.
what is that reason? And we're kind of ignoring those things. We're just masking
Right.
symptoms and moving forward. And it's not really working, is it? It's not working at all.
No, I don't think so. And I think you have a really good point there. There's a
And I
pill.
think there's so much we don't know
Yeah.
about mental illness and the way the mind works.
I got an email from a friend of a friend, and she's written a book about, and I don't want to speak about it definitively because I haven't really looked at the book, but what she's been writing about is how to have an effective life in the face of having this terrible mental illness, right? Because it is an illness. And we don't really talk about mental illness in our culture as if it is that. We talk about that as if someone is deeply handicapped. And that's just not true. It's a disease. And I'm really excited to hear about how she's going to do this. She's going to write this book about being effective. So, I mean, maybe we'll talk more about it on Talk About It. And let her know, and maybe she could come on and talk about it. Wouldn't that be great?
I think it would be great to talk about it because if you look back and think about how cancer was thought of some years and years ago, if you had, it was like the C word. If you had cancer,
Yeah.
it was a death sentence. You didn't talk about it because
Right.
it was that sad and it was that
So
awful.
awful. Yeah, yeah.
But
So,
we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And we've made progress scientifically, and it's not a death sentence anymore. And we can say the words breast cancer at the dinner table, and we can
yes,
say these things. And
yes.
think about AIDS, how in the 80s, if you had AIDS, like you didn't also
Oh
did
my
not
God,
talk
you're
about
right.
it.
You're right about that. You're right.
And
AIDS
we
was,
came
yeah,
through it and we brought it out into the
right.
light, which is
Yep.
exactly what our silent voice is all about. Take these things, take them out of the darkness, put them out into the light. Let's
Oh,
talk about it and let's do something
what
about
an
it.
artful transition,
We
Marie.
can't do
That was,
anything about it until we
no,
actually see it.
you're right. And writing about it, talking about it, publishing it, reading it, and bringing it up to the surface is what we really want to do about, sexual assault. But guess what? Addiction and alcohol and mental illness all come together into that vessel that's called trauma, right?
Right,
Now,
exactly,
neither one
exactly.
of us, neither one of us are experts in the area of psychological stuff or treating trauma. We're writers, and we have written a fabulous book that's getting incredible traction, great reviews. We're waiting for, the Today Show to call us and interview us about our fabulous book. We have great reviews. You'll see it on Amazon. It's called Our Silent Voice Break the Silence. We have some very brave writers who have written in that book. Yep.
You'll be amazed. You'll be
Yeah.
amazed.
It's
And it
really,
will change you.
yeah, it will. So we want you to buy the book and we want you to read the book. It's not easy, but what is easy anyway anymore, really? I mean,
Life is messy.
I know. My husband says, "Hey, can you make cookies today?" It's like, what? Complicate my day with cookies? Come on. So anyway, my book, the one that I wrote, which is a memoir called "Survival Isn't Mandatory," is also getting some pretty good reviews. It's, neither one of them are selling hugely because we haven't been out on the road promoting. But guess what we're going to do next, right?
Get out on the road and promote them.
Absolutely. Well, we want to talk also about an organization that we have worked or taken classes from and support. It's called Right Space Houston, and their classes are virtual, and they have them in, isn't it that little house in the Montrose area
It's on Michigan Street.
on Michigan Street in Houston? In
They have a new venue though now for their open mic nights, which is really lovely. It's wonderful. You should come out and listen some night.
Oh, that's great. Well, we should probably go on the open mic, don't you think?
Yes, we should.
Well, Right Space for the month of May, and these workshops are virtual too, which is very cool. And they're not expensive. It's not like a $400 course. It's not that at all. And many of these classes are, or it's more like a workshop because you write in these classes with Write Space. So one of the ones that I liked was the power of writing from the senses. I always find it's hard to do that, all right? Smelling, tasting, feeling, seeing, touching, sensing, all that stuff is kind of difficult for me. So that one appealed to me. Which one appealed to you for me?
So that sounds more poetic. Like that's more that's more in my line, right? More of the senses and the emotions and the indescribable, intangible stuff. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yours was a spiritual memoir. What do you think that's about?
Spiritual memoir. That just the title has an appeal to me because I think it would be very interesting to write about your journey as a spiritual person, your times of doubt, your times of feeling like you had a really strong faith in something, whatever it might be.
Right.
It could be very interesting, an interesting way to.
Yeah, that one could be interesting too. Yeah, so they have a whole list, and I want to do all of them. I'm thinking about doing a class with the Writers League of Houston, which we'll promote next time too. And the one on Saturday is about writing about yourself in a dramatic way in a memoir, right? So what I'm writing right now is the follow-up book to Survival Isn't Mandatory. I have a lot to do, a lot to write, but I'm finding it easier this time, second book or third book and all, right? It's a little bit easier, but I'm running up against, how do I talk about this person, right? How do I talk about husband number 2, who's still a physician in California? How do I talk about him? So I think I'm going to number them. Remember in my first book, I talked about how I numbered chickens? Because it was too big of a thing to come up with all the names so that they would all go to heaven. So in my memoir, Survival Isn't Mandatory, my mother taught me to give an animal a name so that it would go to heaven instead of to the pound to be killed, right? So she started this mythology when I was very young. So when I got to the age of consciousness, when I could read a book and I could sit with the chickens and they loved me and I loved them and I had to pick one for lunch, that was too hard. It was way too hard. So I numbered them instead, and I had a private conversation with God and told him, no naming this time, I'm going to number them. So I think what I might do is, and by the way, folks, I'm on husband number 3. So that tells you that I've had a life of maybe my picker got a little toasted by trauma, but it's okay. He's great. But I'm going to write about number 1, number 2, number 3. And so
sounds like it will be very interesting.
I certainly hope so. Wow. So I think I'm going to take that class this weekend, and it's from an instructor that I find wholly intimidating. So maybe that's probably the right thing to do.
Well, here's a writing prompt I'd like to leave you and everybody with.
Okay.
I would love to read everybody's few words or paragraph or micro essay on this. So the prompt would be, you've just been sexually harassed or abused in some way. You go to your perfect mother, who's probably imaginary, or your best friend, or your perfect go-to person. What does that person say to you? What is the dialogue like? What is the perfect thing to say to you when you're devastated?
And what does your mother?
For everyone, it's different.
Yeah, it is. It's different. I can hear my mother. I can hear my mother when I was young because it was about her. It would be a reflection on her. How about your mom, if you told her?
Oh, I think I probably would have been told that I was being very dramatic and I should walk it off.
Happy Mother's Day. So next week we're going to be talking about mothers. Ah. How about that?
Listen, they do their best, and some people can't cope with
Well,
that kind of stuff.
hey,
That's
I
all.
know. I did this workshop once where the leader said you have you okay said some stuff that confronted me, and I walked out in such denial. You have the perfect parents. You picked your parents, and you have the perfect parents, and they loved you in the way they could best love you. And I wanted to scream "F you," because that is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted my parents to be wrong, right? They weren't.
Nobody's parents are
They
perfect.
did their best, with what they had. Yeah. Does your daughter?
Okay,
Yeah. So we're going to talk about mothers next week. So happy Mother's Day, everyone.
so
And look
plenty of food for thought.
look in our in the comment section on the Facebook video. There's a comment. I think isn't there a comment section? And we're going to put a link to the workshops with Right Space. We're going to put a link on where you can sign up for it. We're going to do a workshop on writing, how to write your trauma. So we're good writing coaches. So trust us on that one. We can get you through the writing process to get your trauma down on paper that's good. We can do that. So we're going to celebrate Mother's Day next week. And oh, I have one more question, Marie. I'm sorry. It's going to be May 1st. That's
It's a
May.
little early for Mother's Day, but we can
That's,
talk about it.
but it's May 1st. It's May Day. When I was in
Oh,
school, we had a maypole. And every grade, every single grade went out on a different day and did the maypole. And you know what they did? They sang songs, some song about May Day. I don't know. And we each had a ribbon, and there was a over, under, over, under, over, under, around, and through, and then they snapped a picture of us when it was all done. But I found out something about May Day. It's not a Christian holiday, it's pagan. Do you know that?
I do. And what
Uh,
about Cinco de Mayo?
oh, now that's the Day of Freedom. It was about a war, right? Yeah, yeah. But it's better food.
I just know I love the Mexican food. Yeah.
Oh gosh, don't ding us. It is about the food. Oh my goodness, yes. We should
Okay. Well,
celebrate
on that
nature.
note,
We say goodbye.
bye.